Hey, all right, everybody. How's it going? Now, I was watching the storms the other day in the UK. Storm Babet, I think it was called. And luckily, it missed me. It didn't go. South Wales didn't get much of the storm. But I was looking on YouTube, and I seen lots of cars, lots of floods, and lots of cars conking out. And unfortunately, a lot of people in cars don't quite know how to tackle floods, and they tend to go sort of barreling in as fast as they can, and the water comes up, and the air intake is usually somewhere at the top of the grill on a combustion car. So, and the water goes into the air intake, goes into the air filter, soaks it, and sometimes even the water goes into the pistons and cylinders, and it can cause a lot of damage. So a lot of that was happening, and so I was watching cars, a lot of vans and cars. I think it was 2.5 foot of water. I think you said on there was like a measuring stick next to the. It's like a place that floods quite normally because there's a river going past, and it was 2.5 foot. But a lot of cars were coming in, like I said, really fast. A bit stupid. Slow it down a bit. And obviously the water was coming up over the top, going into the air filter and into the engine, and then the car conks out. Now, there I was watching it, and all of a sudden, what happened was an MG4, electric car, an MG4, comes around the corner, goes through, gets halfway, it's in 2.5 feet of water. It starts floating a bit as well. It actually starts floating. So I'll put it up on the screen now. This is the MG4 coming through, and I didn't film this, somebody else filmed it, but this is the MG coming through, and you can see, as it gets halfway, you can see the back end starts to float a little bit. Now, you'd think everybody goes, oh, batteries are so heavy. They're really heavy, these batteries. But there we are. There's an MG4, and it's floating through the water. And as you can see, it gets through the water and out the other side quite quickly. Now, there are other examples. If you go and look on YouTube, there's loads of examples of electric cars being able to go through flood water, whereas combustion cars, they can't. They can't make it through the water. And the reason being is obviously electric cars don't need an air intake. Now, as long as the battery compartment, where all the cells are, is waterproofed, which they usually are waterproofed. I don't think they're waterproof for a prolonged amount of time, but for a short amount of time, they can go through flood water and out the other side, and it should be fine because they are waterproof to a certain standard. Now, I don't mean you can leave them in a puddle of water or puddle. You can't leave them in a big deep water for ages because water will seep in eventually. But for going through flood water, they're fantastic. And like I said, I looked on YouTube, and there's loads of cases of electric cars just barreling through flood water. They just woohoo come out the other side and they drive off, and they're fine. Now, there was one case, I did see one case the other day of some guy living in Scotland, just for some bias, and he had a Tesla, and he ended up with water ingress in his battery, and his battery failed. I'll try and stick it up on the screen now. I'll try and find it and stick it up on the screen now. And he lived in Scotland, and I think his battery, over time, it might have been a fault in the manufacturing process, because sometimes, not everything's done properly, is it? So there might have been a fault in this battery or something, I'm not quite sure. But he had water ingress, and the story says that Tesla didn't want to stand by the warranty because he'd gone through a storm in Scotland. I think that's right. Well, I've put it up on the screen now, so you'll know exactly what it is. So it is the case of that. But when it comes to floods and going through in less than a minute, electric cars, they're very good in floods. So, because a lot of people say, what happens when, there's a flood? Electric and water don't mix. But like I said, if the battery case is waterproof to a certain degree, then going through flood water is perfectly fine. But whereas a petrol or diesel car, if the water gets too high, it goes into the air intake, and that's game over. So there we go. So go look on the internet, you'll see it. Loads of different electric cars going through big piles of water, easy peasy. Anyway, that's my little rant for today. Hoo hoo hoo.